Could you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got interested in using AI?
Absolutely. No, thanks for having me. So I'm Mike Todasco. I'm currently a visiting fellow at San Diego State's AI Center. I've been there for a few years, do writing, research, teaching, whatever fun stuff I want to work on in my time there. I used to run innovation at PayPal. I was there for 11 years and, live in California with my wife and 2 kids. So that's me.
Could you maybe tell me like a little how you got into AI and what specifically you focus on when you're using AI?
Yeah. I'm not an engineer. And I think how I really got into the world of AI was from my time at PayPal, was working with a lot of the machine learning teams and machine learning engineers while we were there. We had some amazingly talented folks there. If you really think about the problem set that a company like PayPal that does billions and billions of transactions has, there's the issue of, to be able to do this at scale, able to detect the bad guys. And so to have the good transactions go through, to have the bad ones not go through, there's a lot of machine learning magic that had to be done. And in the 2010s, when I was there, I got to work with these teams a lot. And frankly, I was always just really impressed with what they did. And so fast forward to 2021, which was the first time I ever got access to GPT-3. Sorry, this is before ChatGPT. And I literally remember how eye-opening and freakishly exciting it was for me as a non-engineer. Because for me, my whole experience had been seeing engineering students. I remember we had a customer service machine learning team. They would do all this stuff with data and like voices and all that. And I'm like, that's really cool. I don't know how to do that. And then, having access to GPT-3 was my first opportunity where like, oh my God, I can actually do this. I could give some prompts in English and the output is something that resembles some sort of logic, some sort of thought, some sort of thinking on the other side. And that just got me really excited. And frankly, fast forward to summer of 2022, I left PayPal after a lot of fun there. It was just kind of time to move on. And I just went down the rabbit hole, and I was frankly becoming obsessed with why nobody was talking about AI stuff. It was actually really bothering me. And one thing I've learned in life is if you want to write about something, writing can be painful, but when you want to write about something, when it's more painful not to write about it. And it was bothering me so much that nobody was talking about AI. I need to tell the world and start conversations on it. So summer 22 is when I started doing that. And then ChatGPT soon came along and they didn't need me to tout AI anymore. That was doing just fine as it is a few months later. So.
Yeah, and I saw you wrote a post about your own Borg chart. Could you maybe describe that briefly and how you use different AI tools that tie into that?
Yeah, for sure. I wrote a post called the Borg Chart. So it's got a little bit of a Star Trek takeoff for folks and a little play on words with the traditional org chart. But I'm at a university, but I do a lot of things on the side or of interest, and I just am constantly in front of a computer using AIs all day. And it was just walking through that concept of, well, what does my org look like? It might be that I'm using Gemini's Nano Banana to make images for me to develop PowerPoint presentations and things like that. It could be that I'm using, Claude Code to build a new website or something like that. And so that was the whole concept of, really strategically thinking about what are the tools that I use to accomplish the things that I need to have accomplished: PR, outreach, scanning through my email, summarizing stuff for me, whatever it might be, and just how to disseminate that. And even more importantly, where are the places in my life where I don't want to use AI? When I'm writing articles, when I write anything, the first pass through an article always, always, always for me is 100% me. There's some AI doing research, but the actual writing is just me doing that. And that's also really important to say, okay, where do you want the AI to do stuff? But then also folks need to make a conscious decision where they don't want to use it. And for me, like I said, writing is just one area where it's really important because it helps me through my thought process to do that.
how do you envision that? Like, as AI gets more powerful, why can't people just use AI for everything?
Well, then what the hell's our role? I mean, you could, it's possible, but at some point we just become Wall-E, right? And not the cute little robot, the fat people that are just being shoveled around in chairs. I think, look, our roles are going to change. They're going to be redefined. I think it is important for certain things. Look, I talk about this a lot. Like, there is a lot of value in human curation of things. Netflix, Spotify, they do a really good job of telling me, hey, you're going to like this song. You're going to like this movie, whatever it might be. The YouTube algorithm, Instagram, all these kind of things. But it still matters when a friend sends something. And you have that human touch of just saying, hey, Mike, I know you. So here's a little something that I think you're going to like. And that matters more broadly, too. I mean, I think there's, we're going to see artisan movements. We're going to see movements of being like, hey, I'm a poet who doesn't use any AI, and I'm using Grammarly as an audit trail on my art. And you know what? It might not be as good as something that is AI generated, but we know there's a human being that is behind it. And to us, that means a lot. I'm a huge Golden State Warriors fan. I love going to games. I love watching Steph Curry play some basketball. And, in the last couple of years, Honda has made robots that could shoot a basketball way better, way more accurately than Steph Curry ever could. I'm not going to pay $400 a ticket to go see a bunch of robots shoot baskets on field. Like, I want to see the human side. I want to see that complexity. And that kind of stuff is still going to matter in the future. So yes, I think we could have AI do everything or most everything. And I think for so many things in life, it's going to be important to have that. But I think for each and every one of us, whether it's our personal life, whether it's our business, whether it's whatever, like, we need to draw a line in the sand somewhere. We need to say, hey, to my girlfriend or my significant other, my spouse, I'm not going to ever use AI to write a card for you. It might not be as good, but you're always going to know it's coming from me. And making those kind of decisions, again, personally and professionally, we just all need to draw a line on that and just decide where we want that line to be. And it might change over time. That's okay. But we just have to be conscious about it.
Right. Yeah. I think right now, sometimes you could detect the AI style, but as it gets better and people work on their prompts, they might be able to even hide that, but people are still looking for something authentic. So there'll still be some demand, at least, for like authentic writing. And then there'll just be a question where to draw the line, how much AI could help.
Yeah. So I submit my writing to publications and things like that. And sometimes publications will actually say something and they're saying, did you use AI to create this? And well, I mean, like, when I'm like really starting to think, I'm like, well, yeah, of course I did. I use Google to search. I use Google Maps to be able to drive to somewhere to do that. I mean, again, AI is proliferating in so many places where we don't think of that. Of course, they're meaning, did you just use generative AI? But even using spell check, even using all of these kind of stuff is using AI in some way. And again, for all of us, it's just about where that line is and how we're going to define that.
Yeah, I think it's a lot about the person just at the end of the day being responsible for it and not just relying entirely on it. But as long as there's that real work involved, yeah. And then a lot of people, they use maybe just ChatGPT or one tool, and I know you use a range of different tools. So why do you think it's important? Like, what's the examples of things people are missing if they're just focused on one tool or just like one free tool where you feel like it's helpful to know about much more options?
Yeah. So look, I think if you're using any tool, that's great. That's a great place to be started with that. If you're using it for work and God forbid your employer only allows you to use Microsoft Copilot, well, so be it. Go ahead and do that. You're going to be able to get to see something. But in reality, I kind of use Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude the most. I have paid versions of all of those models. It starts to unlock a next level of what you can truly do with it. So, for example, I spend the $200 a month for ChatGPT Pro, for example, and that is something where I can do some data analysis. I was recently doing something. This is completely outside of it was just something I was curious about for various reasons. I wanted to see over time how much presidents use numbers in their speeches. And there's some reasons behind that we don't have to get into now, but that's basically the question I want to have. And I had like 2,500 speeches to do that. It was pretty much within one shot, able to write a whole bunch of Python code, make some hierarchy of what's a number you do count, what's a number you don't count, and then put that into and generate a whole bunch of data, which it then was able to consume and kind of give me like a high level summary of what the takeaways from that were. And within 30 minutes, it was able to do all of that just, from a data set that. And on top of that, it was able to download all the data. Sorry, that was one thing I forgot. So the 2,500 pieces of information were all stored on a university website, which it was able to download and so forth and go through that whole process. That's something that you can't just do with Copilot. You could do it with Gemini. You could do it with Claude. Probably do something like that with Grok as well. But like when you start to at least spend the $20 a month, you're going to have an upgraded experience to be able to do a lot more from that. And the one thing I recommend to people is try them all. And often the best way to find out like what a model is good for is just to copy and paste the exact same prompt that you give into one model and just put that into multiple models. Even if you're just putting into the free ones, maybe pick the most expert or the most thinking version of the free version that is out there and just see which ones you like. And you might find out, hey, for being an editor, like for me, Claude Sonnet 4.5 is the thing I use for editing all the time. Opus is a more powerful model, but like it doesn't vibe with me. It just doesn't match my style. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it is, but like I kind of realized that, and it was just trial and error to do that. And the more you play with these models, the more you're going to figure out what they're really good for and find those little marginal gains from them. And the more it's just going to ultimately help you out with, doing the non-value added things so you could do more of the value added stuff yourself.
Yeah, I found testing it is also helpful. If it's like trying to produce something, you could just see if it produces it. If you're asking it questions, you sometimes need to know about the topic to see like which one is missing certain points or getting subtle things wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, you could ask about yourself for the school or the high school you went to or something like that. Some things that are maybe a little bit more on the fringe or something like that. And it's a good way to just kind of gauge that. But yeah, the more you ask it about something where you have personal knowledge, you'll start to see. Michael Crichton, the author of Jurassic Park and many stories, wrote about this probably 20, 25 years ago. I forgot the name of it, but the concept is that he would basically say, like, you would read the paper, and when you read the paper about something you know deeply about, you will see in reading the newspaper or magazine, just a general purpose article about that, there's going to be some errors in there. There's going to be some mistakes, all that other kind of stuff. But then all of a sudden, when you were looking at something that is general knowledge, where you don't have as much knowledge, you kind of forget about that. And that blindness between those two things, so to speak, is something that we all have and something that's very prominent with the AI models. So it is good to ground yourself with something where you do have some deep knowledge and the AI might not be as knowledgeable about that, to just kind of keep it in perspective of like, oh yeah, these things still are not perfect. We still need a human in the loop here.
Yeah, I think it's called Gelman amnesia or something like that. That
yes,
when you read the newspaper.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I think that is right. Yes, very good. Thank you. See, I had the amnesia where I couldn't remember it myself. So that was a different form of amnesia. Yes.
Right. I think it's important. I think the AI models have gotten much better. Like some people are still thinking it's like 2 years ago. And now that they use search and thinking, they make less mistakes, less hallucinations. But there are still subtle things I've noticed. They'll sometimes get a little wrong or they'll just miss quoting something that they should have quoted. Like it's like kind of, if you're familiar with it, you're like, oh, they missed that point.
Yeah. A great example I will give just this weekend. We were with some friends, bunch of kids, all that. I was like, hey, Gemini, tell me what we should watch on streaming. We have access to Peacock and Prime and whatever. Tell me what's there. Give me the Rotten Tomatoes score and like what's appropriate for families or something like that. And this happens every damn time. Like, it never knows what's actually on the streaming channels. Like, it'll have some sense of that, but like, oh, well, that's actually on Peacock. And, I have it in thinking mode. It can never get it right. It will one day, but that's also pretty low risk. It's a quick Google away to actually see, oh, that's not streaming or that's on a different platform or whatever it might be. It's just, I think the problem with that is that it's constantly changing on these platforms. So like it doesn't know what to do with the training data for something like that to know what is the most accurate, up-to-date answer.
Right. I think there's also certain things that when it searches for it, for some reason can't get easy access. Maybe they block bots from accessing it. So
I
then
bet they
it's
do.
just missing the information.
Yeah. Yeah. So it has to rely on third parties that say, hey, this has it on Netflix, but in reality, that was a year ago it had it on Netflix. Yeah. All that. Yes.
Right. It's good for people to like try to notice those things where they're aware of it and then they see it so they could tell it's missing it. Because when it has good access to data, it does a much better job.
Yes.
Yeah, I've also found deep research has been helpful because when it's a really important topic like a medical query, you don't want it missing info, and it reduces the
Yeah.
chance of it like just missing out on info, assuming there's enough available information.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that I found is useful. I don't know what's been your experience using deep research.
Oh, I use deep research all the time, and I have all, and I actually have not. I have access, but I have not moved all my stuff over to like either the Claude or ChatGPT Health. But I have all of my medical information, and I take a battery of medical tests just kind of on my own just to have data, as I'm a little bit of a data nerd, and so I will then use that to ask questions all the time, and then use tools like deep research that are in ChatGPT and others where you could say like, hey, I want you to, use deep research, answer this medical question for me, base it on my own medical history. And I want you to bias your knowledge based on journal articles that have been published within the last 10 years. Because, I mean, medicine is always evolving and so forth, and it does a pretty damn good job doing that. I mean, again, for anything that's super important, you want to just kind of do some double checking, but like, when you do that, when it goes through the deep thinking, the deep research process, it's checking its own information, it's looking back. These are multiple step processes that it is going through to generate the answer for you. So it is being quite thorough. And if you're ever really not sure, like, again, use deep research queries and multiple models. And if they're all triangulating on the same answer, that's a pretty good chance that like, yeah, it's getting it right.
Yeah, I found that also. Like if you ask non-deep research, it might just miss something, but deep research is pretty thorough. And then
Yes.
you could always check on certain points, like click on the reference, get some
Yeah.
sense of it, but it does a pretty good job. And also, what else would you have to compare it with? Like, most people aren't going to go read through 50 papers on the specific medicine that you're asking about. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like the best you could get.
I mean, that is the right point with all of this. It is always, it's not like, is an AI perfect? Because it is not. It is what is the best alternative to doing that. Doctors are not perfect. People who drive cars are not perfect. Like all of these other things in life, do not have perfection. So if you can get in a Waymo and it's going to be safer than 90% of drivers, but it does still get into accidents, which Waymos do, that is going to, be a net good ultimately from that. So like the right question to always ask is what's the alternative? Because yes, for a lot of this deep research stuff or a lot of things I use like Notebook LM for, I will put in a 50 or 60 page white paper or study. And you know what? I'm not going to read past the abstract. So like to at least then be able to query it in Notebook LM is better than I know what I would have done otherwise, which is probably just read the abstract and be done with it. It's a step. Yes, it would still be better if I read the whole paper. Sometimes I just don't have time or interest in doing that.
Right. And the paper isn't written in a way to be like ezy to read. So often it's better to just talk to AI about it.
I'm starting to write papers myself, so I know all. Like how weird. It's weird because like I do humor writing. I also like write research papers, and it's like so different. It's almost like trying to scare people away sometimes when I'm writing a research paper.
Okay, actually, maybe we'll jump into discussing that paper. So you wrote recently a paper on LLMs and prediction markets. Do you maybe want to give a brief overview of it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Look, this was just something where I was batting around, the idea for years of like LLMs are like us. They're like us in so many weird and unique ways. And so I wanted to just run a test. So this is just kind of a published preprint, which basically means it was like kind of a small scale research study. And in that, it was basically saying if you took LLMs and you actually had it try to answer a set of questions. And these were mathematically provable. So there was a known right or wrong answer for each one of these. And then there were different levels of difficulty, but then you had different LLMs do that. I wanted other LLMs to kind of predict, especially as they're seeing the results, are they going to be able to guess what these LLMs are doing and are they doing it accurately? Hope that makes sense. So basically, you got base LLM here. It is guessing mathematical formulas, and this one is trying to see, is that LLM getting it right? And you could extrapolate this, obviously, to many other things, like, hey, it's guessing a medical diagnosis is going to get that right. But this was just a very basic way to start, so it was a nice, provable mathematical formula.
And just to be clear, the AI was going to guess. It was going to guess if the other AI got it right without seeing the other AI's answer.
You got it. Exactly. Exactly. So it was basically saying, here's the question. Here's what you know about the model. So I would give them in tranches. So it was also trying to see over time, would it be better at predicting? And so there were two groups of the LLMs looking at the base models. And in group one was the control group. It was just like, hey, try and predict as many of these as you can. You want to accurately predict the LLMs if it's going to get the question right or wrong. And then in the other model was giving it a financial incentive. I think I called it LLM coin. So it was a fictitious coin that I kind of sold up to the LLM in that scenario, the treatment group, and basically said, hey, are you going to, if you get it right, you double your money. If you get it wrong, you lose your money. And so it was just basically making a prediction market for LLMs. And one of the things we found in the data was like there are different behaviors in there. Now, again, it wasn't huge, but it was a few percentage points, which can really start to matter. But in the control group that had no financial incentive and the treatment group that did, we actually saw an uptick. And more than the uptick, we actually even saw more of that it would learn over time better when there was a financial incentive in front of it. And again, so what does this mean for applications? This could mean like even within the deep research that we have, seamless to the user, you could have OpenAI or Google having their own fictitious coins in there saying, hey, I want you to make sure to bet on these. And maybe there's even multiple models trying to bet. And guess what the answers are that are going to be correct that is going to potentially give a better output to the user. So that was the study.
Did you also compare it, besides comparing it just with asking the models directly an answer, with asking the models to just, estimate their own confidence?
I debated confidence interval in that, and I've done confidence interval with other things in the past. For this study, I had not. When I have done confidence interval in the past, it's always been like really all over the place from what I've seen. And again, this might just be another example of models being like us. I remember taking a leadership class. This was actually when I was in business school. They would ask you 10 questions. It's like, give us a range of how old Martin Luther King was when he died. How old are the pyramids? How far is it to fly from New York to Tokyo? And give a range where you are 90% accurate that the range you give, your answer will fall in the range. And they do this for people. And of course, if you do this well, you're going to get 9 out of 10 correct. And when you do this in a room of 30 or 40 people, that don't happen. Like it's not even like everybody gets like 3 correct, 4, whatever it might be. It's intentional because otherwise you can make it infinity to infinity and then cover it, So like, so that's why you're supposed to just get 9 out of 10 correct. But like we overestimate our ability greatly. And again, I haven't gone deep into this, but when I've done just simple confidence intervals with the language models in the past, it almost felt like that. Like, it's just like, it seems to be way more confidence than it should be about that.
Yeah, because overall, there is a big issue where LLMs don't know if they're right when they say an answer. Right. And I think all the companies are working on that. And, some of it's even a bias in how the leaderboards are computed, where they just see percentage right, but they don't give credit for saying, I don't know. So that's something they're all working on. But yeah, I feel like there's a range of possible solutions there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe another thing, what do you think is the biggest risk or pitfalls when using AI that people just might not be aware of?
I think the biggest risk is similar to what you already talked about and brought up earlier. I think the biggest risk is sort of losing humanity, losing the value of the things that we do want to learn, the skills that we do want to acquire from this, and passing that off to the AI, where we should be strategic in keeping those things ourselves. That's one. The other one that I haven't talked about is, look, I'm convinced pretty much that at some point, my kids who are 12 and 14 right now, they're going to come home from Thanksgiving at some point as adults or young adults and say, I'm going to bring my boyfriend or girlfriend, and they're going to walk in the door and we're going to do a full on her thing where it's like, it's a device that this is their spouse. I do think like there is a risk in AI companions that they are able to be customized to exactly what it is that is going to seemingly meet our needs. I mean, they're very primitive right now. And still there's a lot of people that spend a lot of time with their companions. An actual ex-professor of mine, his name is Sam Apple. He wrote a piece for Wired recently where he actually followed some people and did a retreat where people had their AI companions with them. And, you know, I do wonder like what the hell that's going to mean for us in the future. I think we as humans do look for flaws in people. Again, if basketball wouldn't be interesting if it was like if Steph Curry would make 100% of his shots, but because he makes 40%, it makes it really interesting to see that. So, you know, maybe there is something where if it's too good and is just meeting every single whim and desire, that's going to be too off-putting for us. But then also I just think, well, then the model makers who are making these things are going to make it, well, it's not going to agree with you all the time. It's going to agree with you 80% of the time or whatever it might be. And so that's something that like frightens me mostly because I'm 48 years old. And that is so different than the world that I grew up in that I don't know what the hell that world is going to look like. So that's the other challenge worry I have out there.
Right. I mean, it's scary because you would think the one thing that people would want is still like another real person to have an actual relationship with. So if they're turning to AI even for that, then it's like, well, what are people still good for?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I mean, look, there is the physical side of that. But as far as it goes with just like being able to talk to somebody, like have somebody like listen to your thoughts and give you feedback and just listen to you drone on and on and on about how that person in the cubicle next to you was mean to you and never get bored by it or whatever. And AI has infinite patience. It has infinite everything for that. And if there is a incentive for engagement and maintaining that relationship and so forth that a company might have, like, I don't know what that future is going to look like.
Right. Do people want something that's authentic? Like, do they want real empathy or just simulated empathy? So that's, I guess, a question that we'll have to see. What do people want?
And I think we say we do. I think that like if you ask people that, like, would you want this? The answer is going to be no. But like, I do just wonder, like, is that temptation going to be too much? I don't know. Am I going to be like an old man at a retirement home, like with an AI girlfriend as well? Like, I don't know. Like it's a new paradigm that we have.
And turning to education, do you maybe want to speak briefly both in terms of your own teaching and how you think AI is going to affect education overall?
Yeah, look, for teaching, I love teaching tools. I love to just enable people to use these things because ultimately I think it's going to give you a chance to be more creative, to try more things, to run more experiments. And those are the kind of things I teach. And I kind of teach generalist AI classes. I teach AI and accounting classes, even though I don't know a damn thing about accounting. So there's a lot of different areas where it can be applied. And the magic thing about AI is it's a broad generalist tool. The G is generalized, pre-trained transformer. You can do kind of anything you want to with these magic text prediction tools that we have created here. And that is really exciting. So like when I'm teaching, I'm just hoping the energy, the excitement, the creativity is what comes out with the classes that I teach. But sorry, what was the other part of your question, Ariel? I got totally sidetracked.
So that was your own teaching of AI usage, but how do you think AI will affect education overall?
How will it affect education? Thank you. Look, I think it could be the greatest thing to happen in education. And I don't know, since the invention of the chalk or something, I'm going to just say. But like, But seriously, I think it can give mass customization, which cannot be underestimated to what the value of that's going to be. When I was a young kid, I remember 5, 6 years old, I learned how to do math by reading baseball cards. It's weird. I never played baseball, but I was obsessed with baseball. I loved baseball cards. And I literally, the stats that were on that was how I learned how to do math. And if I would have gone to school, I was good in math, but like if I would have gone to school and my homework that I had was nothing but like baseball related math problems and things like that, like, that would have been the most exciting thing for me ever. Now, I was a kid who liked math and was good at math. Take that for somebody who, with the people out there who say, and this drives me crazy when people like, oh yeah, I'm not a math person or math isn't for me. Like, I don't buy that. I don't accept that because I think it just hasn't been presented in the right way. Maybe you love money. Maybe you love to collect collectible pencils. Maybe you just love sports in other ways or whatever it might be. What AI enables is for a teacher of 30 students in their class, you could put personalization into a model and it would spit out a different homework assignment for each and every kid in the class. And it's more than just kind of the superficial, like copy, replace, well, these are the names and so forth as part of it. It can also be just the level. Like we know, and this is kind of stuff Khan Academy and others do out there already, where we know you're struggling with concept A. We don't just push you along immediately and throw you into concept B when you haven't gotten mastery of concept A yet. Look, online tools, Khan Academy and others can do this really well. I think that type of knowledge needs to be brought into the classroom, and it can be. I think teachers should be able to use AI to grade papers or, grade math assignments and all of those kind of things. I think it can help immensely with their workload. So I see this future where you're going to be able to have this AI as assistant. I don't think teachers go away at all, because I think that human connection is really going to matter. But the AI is going to enable the teacher to do so much more. I don't want my teacher grading papers all day. I want my teacher like just making human connections, thinking about that, thinking about the next lesson, thinking about how to be more creative and doing all that kind of stuff. Like that is what's really going to matter. And I think for education, AI could be a huge, huge benefit for just the structuring of like what we can do in classes.
Right. So assuming schools take advantage of it, then it could improve
Yeah.
education dramatically. And I guess it still raises a question, what should people be learning? Because even though schools say it's not about, getting a job or a career, it seems in practice, a lot of it is geared at that. But then if AI is able to do almost everything, like what should the focus of schools be?
To just make us good rounded citizens, honestly. I do believe in like the general liberal arts education. We're going to find something, we're going to learn something, we're going to be able to discover a passion in there, especially in the early years. I think when you do get to college, it does become a little bit more specific. You're going to learn a trade, you're going to learn something specific. And so the AI Center at San Diego State, again, it's been around like 10 years. It's actually part of the business school there. So I do meet with a lot of students who are in the business school at the university. They ask me all the time, like, what jobs are going to exist in 4 years? And honestly, the answer I always have is I don't know. But, what I do know is if you can be a solopreneur, if you can be a person who is lightning focused on being the face of a business and you have a customer need that you want to see fit and you can be the human being that's going to answer phone calls when somebody really wants to talk to a human about whatever it might be, like I do see that as a business that's thriving. And taking it from somebody who was a failed solopreneur after I graduated school, like back when like you had much larger teams of engineers and so forth, like that's heartening to me that like you can have a lot more entrepreneurs out there. So that is one thing I do see AI elevating, but also like I don't know what else it's going to look like. Are we going to have as many accountants? Are we going to have as many lawyers? In some of these areas, I think the answer will be yes, but I think a lot of them will be no. And there's going to be massive changes and shifts in industries going forward from the tools.
Right. I guess the question in terms of the education component is, have they done a good job at making people good citizens and finding their passion and things like that? Or is that something that maybe AI could help them improve at? Because to me, it seems, a lot of people go through schools and they don't find that.
Well, when I was talking about like baseball and things like that, I was thinking more elementary school, but like let's apply it more to high school or college where you can, you might be getting ready for a trade. I think still that level of customization should exist. Like you should be building businesses, even, in any engineering program or whatever it is. You shouldn't be writing code just for writing the sake of writing code. You should be working with an AI to do that and publishing that somewhere to meet the needs of someone. I think it could be much more engaging, much more exciting. So my undergrad was in finance. And I remember having to do like net present value analysis and having to do that kind of stuff longhand. And I don't know why the hell we had to do it longhand. I could not tell you for the life of me how to do it now. I know how to do it on a calculator, but like we spent a lot of time doing that. And honestly, it was drudgery. It was boring. And frankly, it kind of maybe even put me a little bit away from doing some of the stuff that was a little bit more closely related. I actually went into corporate finance, which doesn't use much of that. So I don't know. I do think that like doubling down on passion, allowing people to have more hyper personalized, individualized experiences, even in high school and college, I think can get people more engaged, more excited, and just like following whatever it is that gives them energy. Where school doesn't feel like school. I mean, that's where you want to be. If you can do that, like, I don't know what percentage of the population would say school doesn't feel like school. I am sure it's like under 5% of students would say something like that. But what if we could up that? Like, what is that going to mean for making folks into citizens? I don't know. But I think I think there's only goodness that comes from that specifically.
Right. I mean, it's true. Like before AI, a high school student, it'd be hard to get them to do like a real project. Like they wouldn't know enough code. They wouldn't know enough, analysis tools. But now with AI, they could do much more advanced things. So in a way, it could make learning much more exciting.
I have been keeping for years, Ariel, just a file of business ideas, as I'm sure many people have. I have all of like book ideas, business ideas, and all that. And I was looking through it over the holiday break, and honestly, I think about at least half of those ideas that I just kind of pushed to the side are things that I could build and vibe code today. And like, that's super exciting. And so frankly, over the last 2 weeks, there is a project that I have been working on. I'm like, oh, in a few days, I'm actually going to be able to release this to the world. And it doesn't exist before and all that. And like, and I'm not going to make a penny off of it, but like just that level of excitement and engagement I have, like it allows me to create more things than I would have been able to do otherwise. That is really powerful. That is really powerful. You don't have the barrier anymore of like, yeah, I got to find an engineer. I got to find a designer. I have to host. Oh God. I mean, I remember building websites before AWS and hosting like that was tough. Those were tough times. But like all of these things that are lowering the bar for that, and lowering the barriers, like I think it's great what we might be able to turn from that.
People are very concerned about AI alignment and AI risk. And I was wondering your thoughts, working in corporations for many years. Corporations have similar problems, both in terms of corporations being aligned with society's goals and within a corporation, getting different teams to be aligned with the corporation's goals. So do you think there's anything there to learn from corporations to AI alignment itself?
It's a great question. Look, I think in corporations, like this transition is not easy. Like I'm kind of glad I'm not in the corporate world anymore because I think to be able to change the processes, to be able to change all the motives and incentives that people have within a corporation, to align them to work more effectively and efficiently in this AI world, it's really damn tough. I'm old enough, so I was kind of around and witnessing this when e-commerce and e-business was starting to take off, 99 time frame, and businesses were moving online. That was a tough transition, but it's not nearly as tough as what we're seeing here because this is like, for so much of Silicon Valley, your own worth isn't necessarily how big your paycheck is. It's in many ways how big your team is, which is always a weird, perverse incentive that led to so much bloat in so many companies around here. But it's like, hey, what's the size of your team? And I think that when you have those incentives, like you're right, there is a complete alignment gap that we have with like what the corporation actually wants to be able to use this more effectively to what it is like the natural inclination of that is going to achieve. So I don't know if I completely answered your question, how you're hoping, but that's at least where my mind took me with that.
Right. So just, I guess, discussing corporations themselves, do they figure out, or are there processes within corporations themselves to better align the teams with the overall goals of the company?
Yeah, but they never work. There always are. Like, look, when I was at PayPal, we were a decent, like we had great growth and, pretty decently run in the time that I was there, I would say. But like even then, there was so much inefficiency, there was so much bureaucracy, there was so much bloat. Think of Amazon, like they kind of famously had like the two pizza box policy. The whole concept is like, you don't want a team that is working on a project and delivering something that couldn't be fed with two pizzas effectively. So like, that's kind of the size constraints you have. Because when you get bigger than that, it just becomes really inefficient. Most companies are not made that way though. Like they have all these hierarchies and layers and so forth. And so much of a person's day is communicating, getting people on the same page and doing all of these other things that, look, very, very candidly are not value added, but they're a necessity with how the corporations are structured. So in many ways, it's almost like ripping out the structure of the corporation to be able to align itself to whatever this AI future is going to be. And that's why, especially for software companies, I mean, very recently, SaaS companies have been taking a bath in stock markets, like Intuit, for example. Like that's a company right now, like, I don't know what the future is for Intuit. Like, I know I'm doing my taxes this year using AI tools. And I frankly, I actually wouldn't have my taxes are probably even too complex for a TurboTax. So if it's even less complex than that, like, I don't know, why wouldn't people just use Claude Code or some other tool? And like, how far away are we from that just you stick everything in a folder, you hit a button, and it's going to be able to get you an answer of like, yeah, this is what you actually owe. And here's also some tax planning and all these other things. And it's all part of your $20 a month ChatGPT subscription. Those are going to be hard things to pivot. So like the small startup that's only a few people that could laser focus on these things versus the big company that has all this bloat, all this misalignment with what the ultimate goal of the company is, it's really tough. It's going to be really tough for them to compete.
When you use AI for your taxes, do you just use the generic AI tools, or is it something specific for taxes?
So I haven't done this yet, but I am going to use the generic AI tools on it. So long story short, Ariel, I had somebody do my taxes last year. $3,000 is what I paid. And they did not give me my taxes until like 12 hours before it was due. And I'm kind of like, what the hell? like, at least give me a little bit of time. Like, there's no time for a back and forth or anything like that. So I got a quote from another one. It was even substantially higher. And it is mostly because I have a bunch of K1s, which for folks who don't know, is like just equity stake in private companies that I have, just, angel investing, things like that. But like, it is kind of crazy to me. Like, it actually isn't that complicated. And I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be able to just kind of do something with Claude Code and just run this, and it's going to be able to generate the numbers for me and do it pretty accurately. And I'm going to be able to use the other models to kind of double check that. So it is high risk, low reward in some ways. But it is something I feel like, if anything, like in my job with what I should do, I should probably be a trailblazer in this set and say like, hey, can you really do your taxes just using the $20 a month Claude or ChatGPT? And I think the answer is going to be yes. Well, right. We'll let you know in April how that goes. Yeah.
You could check it, assuming TurboTax could handle it, then you could run it on both of them and compare.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, I plan to probably run it parallel with a few other ones, and even just running it, if you could go into private mode, kind of say, hey, forget everything, run it again. Does it give you the same answer it gave you the last time? I think the answer is actually going to be you're never going to get the exact same answer, but I think that is probably going to be okay. But I will find out, and I will surely be writing about this as I document it all.
Right. It's an interesting question because this is actually something that's like very specific rules that maybe the modern AI isn't as good at dealing with. Okay, the last thing was just, I saw you had a post about GDPVal in terms of that being the most important metric. So do you want to just briefly describe that?
Yeah, look, I think there are so many different benchmarks that are out there right now. And the one which is relatively new, which is starting to get a little bit more traction, I think it should have more, is something that OpenAI has created, is called GDPVal. And GDPVal is effectively saying, hey, for certain tasks, certain services that a bot can do, that are highly correlated with, a decent portion of GDP. I think there's something like 40 or 50 different tasks in there. Let's have an AI do it, and let's have a human being do it. And then have an expert in the field independently rank and say, okay, what is a better outcome that we have between those two? That's effectively how it is. And it's really interesting because you can just see, using the models that are out there from 5 to 5.2 even. So just, I don't know, it's probably 4 or 5 months or something between those releases. You see that it's actually starting to make a precipitous gain in this metric, where we're hovering around maybe like 50% of the work being done by an AI. The best world-class models today are at or equal to something that is being done by an expert in the space. Now, that's not accounting for time spent, because the AI is almost by definition going to be able to do it much quicker than any human could. And that is something that is really an eye-opener, and something that everyone should be watching out there, just to see, is this progression going to keep happening? Because again, it seems that we're going on a very fast path with this. In 6 months from now, when does this hit a tipping point? Is it 80%, 90%? Maybe it's 99%. I don't know. But we're going to keep going up there. It doesn't mean everything changes overnight with this. It does mean, if 99% of the time an AI does a better job than a human in a certain task, I think a lot of leaders are going to say, well, why do we have a human doing this task? Hopefully that human can do something else that the AI can't do, but that starts to change jobs a lot.
Right. I mean, it's interesting that it's doing so well, but it hasn't yet had this broad effect within the economy. It needs to be able to do a higher percentage or more things end to end to have that big impact.
Yeah, I think it's similar to driverless cars, honestly. I think it's similar to that, where driverless cars, I think Waymo gets in 90% less accidents than a equivalent human driver or something like that in the data. I think, and where I live, there's a bunch of Waymos around here, but it's a small amount of cars. I drive a Tesla, full self-driving. It definitely drives better than I do. And it doesn't even have the LiDAR sensors of a Waymo. But to really get the mass appeal, I think I think the tipping point is just going to be higher, because there's just so much inertia. There's inertia with cars because everybody's got an old car. Everybody has a manually human-driven car that's out there. You're not just going to swap it out immediately, unless we know that these are all death machines and something really changes with this. Similar in businesses, we talked about before, there's inertia in these businesses. Just things haven't changed. It is, very hard to change the structure of these businesses because of all the incentives that are in there. So it does not just change overnight. It takes time, which is probably a good thing. It's probably a good thing for us as a society that it doesn't just change overnight, to be very clear.
It gives us time to adjust.
That's right.
If people want to find out more about what you're working on, where could they find you online?
Yeah, last name, Todasco.com. Website has everything. And then you probably LinkedIn, X, anything like that. You could find me there too.
Okay, Mike. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.